Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to a brand new mod spotlight on RFTools. RFTools is a nifty power-based mod, so it's a technical mod. It uses RF power, so the power from thermal expansion and extra utilities and all those other mods that use RF-based stuff, and it has a bunch of cool stuff. It's got a teleporter system, it's got a shield system. It's not a mod that has ore processing, but it has a bunch of other cool stuff. It even has a dimension building system that's a little bit similar to Mistcraft, but it uses RF power and it's a technical approach to dimension building. So we're going to get started taking a look at some of the basics of RFTools, and then we'll get into some of the more advanced stuff. Luckily, it does have in-game manuals, so you can go ahead and read through how this mod works using the in-game manuals, and it's very cool and useful. So without further ado, let's start taking a look at what RFTools brings to you. Alright guys, let's talk about some nifty tools that RFTools brings you. First off, there's a wrench. This is just your standard wrench, so you can use it to pick up items and move stuff. It also has some other advanced features when you put it in select mode by shift right clicking into the air, but we'll take a look at those a little bit more in the future. But overall, can rotate items like a wrench would and can pick up items. Standard wrench mechanics. And the next item to show you then is the RF network monitor. Now this one's pretty cool, and I don't think there's too many mods out there that have something similar. You can right click on any RF network conduit, so you can click on flux ducts or something like that, and you'll be able to see how much energy is currently stored in all the objects connected to that thing. So we can see here our pulverizer is full. Nice. And we can also see that our redstone furnace not quite so full, a little bit less. We can go ahead and hook this up to our power system here, and we'll notice that this thing's filling up, and we can see now we're connected to a bunch of other resonant flux ducts, obviously. And you can filter this, so if you just want to see resonant flux ducts, you can do that, or if you just want to see furnaces, you can do that as well. And there's also an option to turn it on to RF per tick mode, so you can see how much it's generating or using. It's a nice way to kind of track here and figure out, what kind of power gen's occurring. So if I click this on, we'll be able to kick this guy into gear, and we can see the magmatic dynamo draining power and the resonant flux duct getting power. Very cool. Now, if you're trying to diagnose your network and figure out, which block is really draining so much power, all right, it's a pulverizer somewhere. Just double click on that pulverizer, and you'll notice that the block that you clicked on in the interface starts blinking with a red outline for about 5 seconds. So if we want to check out the creative energy cell, boom, there it is. If we want to figure out, oh, there's a resonant flux duct, cool. So just double click, it closes the interface there, and then highlights the block that you clicked on for a couple seconds. Now another nifty block is the RF monitor. Let's take a look at what this does. I've currently got the RF monitor set to emit a redstone signal when the redstone furnace here drops below 50% RF in its internal capacitor. So as soon as we hit about 30,000 RF here, we should see this redstone signal tick on. Ta-da! Nice. So how does this interface work? It's pretty easy. You right click and you'll see a list of all the machines in a 3x3x3 area. So for example, if we were to put a couple more pulverizers down, we should be able to see the one that's here. Nice. But we can't see much further than that. Cool. You just highlight which machine you care about, so pulverizer, redstone furnace, pulverizer normal, and then you configure what your alarm level's set at, below 80%, below 50%, whatever. You can also change it to emit a redstone signal when it's less, more, or off. So off means it won't do anything, but less or more is where you're going to want to be. So more than 45% and it'll emit the redstone signal, or less than 45% and it'll emit the redstone signal. Neat. Now the liquid monitor pretty much works the same way. It's the same interface, same type of block, but it monitors a nearby tank. So again, 3x3x3 area. You'll notice that the tanks will show up in the interface here. And right now I've got it set to emit a signal when it's less than 50%. So if we fill this tank up more than 50%, boom, we've seen the redstone signal turns off. Sweet. So same functionality, just for liquids instead of for RF. Now we've seen how to scan for liquid and RF energy. There's also a storage scanner, which is pretty cool, but a slightly different type of interface and a slightly different type of mechanic. This block does require power, whereas the previous blocks did not require power to run. So you'll notice it has an internal buffer here. What you do is you open up the interface, and you can set the radius on which to scan. So I'm going to scan within a 1 block radius, and we can see that there's a chest behind it. Cool. If I expand this radius, so if I wanted to drag this out to about a 4 block radius, boom. Now we'll see that we picked up a redstone furnace nearby and a couple chests. I'll expand the radius even more, and we should wind up seeing, you'll notice that, by the way, it's taking longer to scan each time we run this, and it's also using power to do the scan. We picked up the redstone furnace, the pulverizer, and the chests. Now if I click on one of these chests, we'll see what's inside of it. So this chest here happens to have 2 pulverizers inside. This chest happens to have an RF network monitor and a hardened flux duct. Sweet. And the pulverizer over here has some cobblestone, sand, and gravel, and the redstone furnace has some cobblestone and stone, because they're both operating on cobblestone. And if I wanted to, I could search for things. So if I came over here and said grav, it will search for anything that has a matching object in its inventory. So I can see that the pulverizer highlighted in yellow actually has gravel in it. And if I wanted to search for hardened flux ducts, I could do that and double click to find which inventory it's got it in there. Sweet. So if we wanted to look for pulverizers, we'll see that chest is highlighted. Okay, look, it has 2 resonant pulverizers in it. Let's double click. There's the inventory, and go get them. Awesome. And of course, once we click here in the interface and re-inspect the chest, you'll notice it's using a little bit of energy every time we go ahead and look inside the inventories. And of course, scanning the objects in the area also uses energy to find out what's nearby. But it's a very cool system for if you have a lot of chests and you haven't, set up an automated system yet to track where everything is, you can easily track down and find what you're looking for. Cool. And as a final note, if you search for something that many inventories have, like cobblestone, you'll notice both of them are highlighted here because both of these inventories had cobblestone. Cool. Now, on the topic of storage, RFTools introduces a system that's kind of like a scaled-down version of AE2, so Applied Energistics type abilities, not nearly as flexible as Applied Energistics. It's really kind of a middle tier between just like regular storing items in chests. And then think of Applied Energistics as something that you would eventually move to outside of this. Or it can actually integrate with Applied Energistics if you want. And it actually doesn't need power, so you don't have to put power down there. So basically the way this works is pretty cool. First off, you're going to want to craft yourself a storage module tier. You'll notice that Tier 1 can store 100 stacks of items, Tier 2, 200 stacks, and Tier 3, 300 stacks. And if you wanted to, you could look up the recipes of these guys. They're pretty straightforward to make, not too complex, really. And you place your storage tier module down here on the bottom left. Once that's there, you can start placing items inside the device. Cool. And you can pull items out of the device as well. Fancy. You can, of course, filter on the items. I typed something in there, so if we wanted to search for lava buckets, we could find them and pull them out. So similar functionality to Applied Energistics, right? But obviously much more scaled down. You don't have import and export buses and all that other fancy stuff. But this is just a regular inventory like any other, so you can pipe items in and out using item ducts and that kind of thing. You've got several options down here. Currently, items are shown in a list view, but you can show it in a column, or even if you want to, just icons. Neat. You can also sort on name or sort on the counts or, something like that. And there's also a grouping mechanic, which I'll show you in a moment. And another component of this is the storage filter module. This allows you to filter what's allowed to go in the inventory. So we'll put it in whitelist mode and we'll make it so that only flux ducts are allowed in there, for example. So I'll go ahead and place these in here. There we go. You can specify things like OR dictionary, ignore metadata, ignore NBT, or matching on the mod. So you can make it so that all items from the same mod are allowed in there. So pretty cool stuff. We can go ahead and drop that in there, in this slot, and we'll see that these guys are allowed in there. And then you'll note, of course, we can't put creative energy cells in there. We can't put anything else except what's been allowed by the filter. Sweet. Now, once you've got your storage module, so you can see here, current contents, 2 out of 100 stacks, we can take that out and put it in what's called a storage module tablet. Now, this thing does need some power by way of RF energy, so you're going to want to charge that thing up, and then you're going to craft it together with the storage module that you've got. And then you'll get a storage module tablet that contains those items, and you can carry it around and use it almost like, a bag or an inventory to carry around. Nice. I like it. Now, of course, this only gives you access to one storage module. There is a way to get access to a little bit more. So let's get ourselves a new storage module. And we're going to take a look at remote storage. Now, this block does require power. Okay, this has the ability to store up to 4 storage modules. So I'm going to get 4 tier 3 storage modules here. And then all we need to do is get ourselves a remote storage module. That's this guy. And we're going to link it here. You'll notice now that it's changed color when we place it in the interface. This remote storage module is now linked to this remote storage device, which of course requires RF to operate. When we add the remote storage module to the storage module tablet, we now have access to the 4 inventory slots there. We'll probably have to charge this tablet up as well. Like I mentioned, it requires RF. Cool. So you'll see that there are currently 0 out of 300 stacks. And if we take a look in here, we'll notice that we've just placed 2 stacks in the first storage module. Cool. Now, if we click this cycle button, it'll go ahead and cycle to the next storage module. So if you watch here, currently we have 5 out of 300 stacks. And if we look in here, we've got 5 out of 300. If I click the cycle button there, you'll notice that we now have 0 out of 300 stacks. And I can start putting items in there, cycle, we'll put 2 items in there. We'll notice that we can access all 4 of these guys. So here's the one with 5, here's the one with 3, and here's the one with 2. And then our 4th cycle, obviously, there you go. We can go ahead and store. So as you can see, a nifty way to link back to a pretty decent sized amount of remote storage. Very cool. So you can either put the storage modules themselves in the tablet or a link back to a remote storage block that can hold 4 storage modules. So next, let's talk about auto-crafting. There are 3 tiers of auto-crafters in this mod, and the different tiers basically allow you to have different numbers of auto-crafting available. So we'll put down tier 1, 2, and 3. Now tier 2 allows you to program 2 recipes. Or tier 1, I mean, can do 2 recipes. Tier 2 can do 4 recipes. And tier 3 can do a total of 8 recipes all in one go. Pretty cool. Let's take a look at how this works. I'm going to go ahead and get myself some wood. We're going to get some wood and some wooden planks. Let's say that we wanted to convert oak wood into sticks. Well, there's 2 crafting processes, right? Oak wood to wood planks, and then wood planks to sticks. So I'll click on the first crafting recipe, and we'll go ahead and put oak wood in the crafting window here and hit apply. You'll notice now that it's telling me it's going to make 4 oak wood planks. There's a couple buttons here, which we'll talk about in a moment. Okay. So now, whenever I put oak wood in there, it's going to output the wooden planks to the orange inventory. Nice. That's because it's set to external mode. If we say internal mode, what it'll do is put the oak wood planks back into its internal inventory. Cool. So if we wanted to get oak wood planks out of here, we'd put it in external mode, and then these can be piped out through some piping system. Now let's go ahead and program the sticks. Cool. Nice and easy. So if I place oak wood in here, you'll notice it turns into oak wood planks and just stays there. And if oak wood planks go into the internal inventory, it goes to sticks. So what we'll probably want to do if we want to go straight from oak wood to sticks, we'll tell the oak wood plank module to go internal, and we'll leave the sticks to external mode. Now when we put oak wood in there, boom, notice it goes directly to sticks. If you watch closely, it converted into oak wood planks, and then the oak wood planks, which sat here, turned directly into sticks. Nice. Another option is the all or keep mode. In keep mode, it'll always keep one of an item in the inventory slot, ready to be refilled by some kind of auto piping system. So if you don't want it to use the last item in a stack, that's the way to go. Nice. And you'll probably want to configure that as well. For this one, we'll set this to keep as well. So now what it'll do is it'll make sure to keep at least 1 oak wood plank available at all times so that, you know, as items get piped in, they can go ahead and land right in there. But we might not necessarily need to keep the oak wood plank, so we'll switch this one back to all mode, and it'll go ahead and convert them all directly into sticks. Obviously, this crafting requires RF, and you can turn on and off the auto crafting with redstone mode. So you can say that it requires a redstone signal to operate, and it won't do any crafting until it receives a redstone signal. Nice. And you can also switch it from slow to fast mode. So in slow mode, it's probably going to take a little while to do all this crafting. And if we were to go ahead and get ourselves some more wood and switch it to fast mode, let's see how fast it goes now. Notice it's significantly faster. Nice. And then finally over here there's a slot for one of those filters. The same filter that I had used in the storage system can go here to filter what items are allowed to be piped into the block. And obviously the tier 3 has 8 crafting modes, so if you have a lot of crafting steps that you need to do, definitely a cool approach would be to go with the tier 3, and it can quickly convert from one item down to several others. The next block to show you is called the block protector. Very cool, nifty little device. First, you're going to want to switch your smart wrench to select mode, and then shift right click on the block protector, and then right click on any blocks in the world you want to protect from being removed. Now, when you try and harvest these blocks, notice nothing's happening. So a nifty way to protect blocks from being damaged. Every time you try and do this, however, it is going to go ahead and drain energy out of the block protector. So right now you can see the block protector is draining energy at a constant rate, just keeping those blocks protected. But every time we go ahead and try and remove one that should be protected, it's going to drain a big spike of energy out of there. So make sure to keep this thing well powered. It can protect against wither explosions. However, it's going to drain a large amount of power for the larger explosion that the wither causes. So if you really want to build a protective box, you can for a wither, but you're going to need a lot of power. It's probably recommended that you have several block protectors protecting several smaller chunks of blocks. And of course, if you want to remove the protection, it's as easy as right-clicking on the blocks, and all of a sudden they're no longer being protected there and can be broken very easily. Now the next thing I want to show you is actually really a neat block, and I don't think there's anything like it anywhere else in any other mod. I might be wrong, I'm sure there might be something out there, but nothing that I've typically used or played with in the past has a block like this. You'll notice that when you place this block down, it represents the up, north, east, south, and west sides, so it's very easy to figure out which sides are which. And when you open up the interface, there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. So what is this block? It's called the power relay, and it allows you to control power going into and out of the block based on a redstone signal. Let's take a look. So first off, the west side here. Let's go ahead and set it up so that the west side can only accept power, an input node, when it's receiving a redstone signal. So if we connect this guy up, you'll notice the power relay has 0 RF in it. If we get ourselves a lever and right click, you'll notice now it's receiving RF. You can also measure how much power is allowed to go in there, up to a maximum of about 50,000 RF. So when the redstone signal is on, it's allowed to accept 50,000 RF on the left side. You know what? We'll let it accept up to 50,000 RF on the west side here, even when redstone signal's off. Cool? Now how about the east side? Let's export energy from the east side. So let's set it up so that this guy, when there's no redstone signal, is not allowed to export energy on the east side. So we'll get an empty energy cell and pop him down right there, make sure he's allowed to accept energy. Notice nothing's going in because there's no redstone signal. I'm going to say 500 RF is allowed when there's no redstone signal, and now we're getting about 500 RF per tick going into the resin energy cell because there's not a redstone signal applied to the power relay. Let's bump this guy up to the max of 50,000 here on the east side when there is a redstone signal. So 500 RF per tick, pretty slow. Right click. Much faster, right? So you can see you can use the power relay to configure different sides outputting different amounts of RF or inputting different amounts of RF depending on a redstone signal condition. So maybe you want to prioritize power flow throughout your network and you want to make sure that your AE system, for example, is always powered no matter what. So if your pulverizers start running and draining power from your battery, you can emit a redstone signal from your energy cell when it gets low on power, or using that RF power monitor that we saw earlier. And we can combine that to say, hey, when this thing starts to get low, emit a redstone signal, meaning that you're not allowed to emit so much energy out to the right side, that kind of thing. So you can use this. It's a very powerful tool for manipulating which machines get priority power. So the next thing I want to show you guys from RFTools is a mechanic that I think is pretty nifty. It's the teleportation system. There's several blocks involved in teleportation. It, as usual, requires RF energy, like most things in the mod. So there's several steps to get going with teleportation, and as you can imagine, it's probably well described in the book. So if you have any problems with it, you can flip through here and figure out all the cool stuff you need to know, or just watch the next part of the spotlight. So step 1, matter transmitter. This is the sending side of the teleportation system. So there's basically two sides, the sending and receiving end. Okay, so the matter transmitter here is going to be used to send a player to another spot. Okay, that other spot is designated with the matter receiver. Boom. Now both sides require RF. If you don't have RF on your receiving side, bad things can happen. And we'll check out what those bad things might be in just a bit. So to get started, we've got those two together. Now, how do we link them? For that, we're going to need a dialing device. Okay, dialing devices, again, requiring RF. So you know what? Let's put the dialing device here on the RF system. There we go. You can see its internal power buffer starting up. What you'll find is that there are two spots. The top is the matter sender and the bottom is the matter receiver. You can also right-click on these guys to designate a name. So we'll call it sender 1, and we'll call this guy over here dire home. Cool. Now if we look in the block, we'll see sender 1 and dire home. Now we have two options here. We can either hit the dial button, which will establish a connection between the two, the transmitter and the receiver, and keep it open all the time. Or we can choose dial once. As soon as a player goes through, it'll close the connection. So let's go ahead and choose the dial once option. Boom. All of a sudden, we've got this nifty little blue beam shooting out of here. And it did tell us on the bottom here that the dialing was okay. Cool. So if we go and step in, boom, teleported. Nice. Now the time it takes to teleport and the energy it takes to teleport is dependent upon the distance, and there's a modifier for dimension travel. So you get a big burst of energy required to travel from one dimension to another. Keep that in mind. Now, what other blocks do we have here? Well, there's a couple cool ones. First off, you've got your destination analyzer. Let's take a look at that. If we wanted to hit the sender and home here, we could hit a check button, and this will check the status of power on the selected receiver. And if we hit check, you'll see dial is okay. Nice. Now, if we had another receiver over here, so for example, this one, okay, and we'll call this death, because that's probably what's going to happen. Now, if we try and dial from sender 1 to death and hit check, matter receiver power too low. Let's dial it anyway and see what happens. I think I spoiled it by naming. Ah, that was not good. Now, if you want to protect against the ability to die, you can go ahead and craft yourselves a matter booster. This guy is going to help boost the matter transmission on your transmitter, making it so you don't need to have power on the other end. So if we go to the death mark now and hit check, you'll see the receiver's too low, but we're going to dial it anyway and travel through. Oh, it's out of power. So I definitely took some damage and got a little bit of a nausea effect, but I didn't die. So at least there's that. Another option to check out is this block called the Simple Dialer. First, shift right-click on a transmitter, and then head over to your receiver and shift right-click on that one. Now we've configured the Simple Dialer for their transmitter and receiver. You'll notice there's a little blue spot right here. When that little blue spot receives, you guessed it, a redstone signal, it'll activate the transmitter and allow your player to go through. Nice. So you can use redstone signals to control when to activate matter transmitters. You'll also notice that it activates in the dial mode, not dial once mode. So it'll always be activated for you to walk through whenever you want. I think a feature request is making it so you can configure whether this goes in dial or dial once mode. But right now, dial mode is your only option for the simple transmitter. And then finally, you have the charged porter. This is a device you can carry around in your inventory. Shift right-click to set the teleportation destination. Give it a decent, and I mean very decent amount of RF. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, we've still got some time left. And we're charging. And we're charging. So as you can see, large internal power source for the charge porter. You'll notice that when I use it right now, because I'm not going a very large distance, it's quick and it uses very little energy. However, if you were to travel a large distance, or like I said, between dimensions, you're going to use a large amount. I think you use a little bit more than half of the charged porter's internal power source when you travel between dimensions. So keep that in mind. You can only use this once to travel from one dimension to another before it has to be recharged. And finally, you may notice that there are access rules around here. You can specify whether this is a public transmitter or a private one, and you can specify the people in the list who can add to it. So we'll say Soren might be the only person allowed to access this, and maybe even Direwolf20. That's probably a good idea. Now, there's a couple rules, and you can read the details in the teleporter system under the access control system, but long story short, you can see here, in case of a transmitter, an unauthorized player will not be able to dial to a receiver or to interrupt the dial. So he basically can't use the dialer to affect it. However, in the case of a receiver, an unauthorized player can't dial to it. However, he or she can teleport there if there's an authorized transmitter already dialed to that receiver. So if you wanted to lock down the receiver side, if there's already a transmitter that the player has access to, they can still get there. They just can't dial to there. Pretty neat. So if teleporting wasn't cool enough for you guys, hopefully shields will be. So the shield system is very cool, I think. I think it's really neat. Let's go ahead and run some power over to power our shield system. We'll put it right over here. Now there's 3 tiers of shield projector. You can look in the book for some more details about the different tiers, but basically tier 1 can handle up to 256 blocks. Tier 2 can handle up to 1024 blocks, and Tier 3 allows you to do more damage with your shields if you feel like harming entities that happen to walk into them. So let's go with a simple Tier 1 projector. Boom, internal power set, and a bunch of options here that we'll talk about in just a moment. So how do we activate the shield? First off, place down your shield template blocks in whatever pattern you want them to be in. So I'll do a simple pattern here, and maybe we'll even do something like this. That sounds cool. Nifty thing. So you can use this for doors, you can use this for all kinds of stuff. When you're ready, right-click the shield template with a wrench, like so. There we go. Right-click the shield projector with a wrench. Ooh, fancy. So you have a lot of options for how the shield works. The default is this fancy-looking little graphic, which I think is really cool. That's the default color for the shield. Now you can actually change that if you want. Nice. I like it. I like everything about it. Or if you wanted to, you could go ahead and change that to be a solid texture from any block that you place in there. So I think we might need to turn it on and off in order for that to actually change. Yep, so there we go. So solid texture, but I can still walk through it. Cool, because of the conditions that we're going to show in a minute. So we could have this really look like anything. If we wanted it to look like sand, that should be fine. Like I said again, just on and off that thing, and then boom, sand. Cool. But personally, I like the shield texture. You can also make it invisible if you want. So you'll notice there's still a bit of shadow. So there's blocks there and it's blocking the sunlight. So you can kind of see where it is if you have a large light source going on. But otherwise, it's totally invisible and you can't see anything. I like it. Now, let's go ahead and switch it back to shield mode because that is the coolest thing ever. And we'll talk about some of the access rules. So what can we configure here? You can change different conditions about who's allowed to go through the shield and what happens to them when they do. So right now we have, we'll add a condition for the default, which is everything, is allowed to pass through the shield, which is what we've already seen. Cool. If we wanted to, we can change that for passive mobs. We can change it for hostile mobs. We can change it for items or players. And optionally, you can add names for the players. So right now we'll add player, and we'll say that players are not going to be allowed to pass through the filter. We'll say it's solid for them. Boom. Now you'll notice that, hey, I can still walk through. I'm a player. That's because it reads this from top to bottom. So the first thing it checks is that default everyone is pass. So let's move this down so that players is solid first and default pass is next. Notice now, hey, I can't get through. That's right. Ouch, running right into the wall. So now for players, it's solid, but let's change that. We'll make it so that players take damage as they go through. So we'll go ahead and say that it's damage for players. We'll insert that guy, and we'll delete the player solid. Notice now when a player walks through, he's going to take some damage. Ouch. Oh, I'm so dead. So let's get rid of that setting. That's no fun. We'll delete him. And remember I said that you get more damage if you use a tier 3 shield, so that can be pretty painful. Let's go ahead and add another filter. So you can see solid damage. So basically solid damage is a combination of solid and damage. That's pretty neat. You can also set it so that, you know, for example, items can't go through. So if we insert that there, item solid. Items aren't allowed to travel through there. However, if we had this guy remove the item solid option, and we'll just leave it set to pass all, or you just leave it blank if you want. Items are allowed to travel through, which you'll see there. Cool. Nice. One other option down here is for the type of damage that it can do. So if it was in damage mode and we hit generic or player damage. So player damage requires more energy, but it treats the damage as if a player did it. So it'll drop items that only players would be able to get, and it'll also drop experience orbs when something is damaged by the force field. Of course, like I said, requires more power. And there's a redstone button as well, so you can you know, require a redstone signal to activate the force field. So I could totally use this for a really cool door, right? Only players can walk through. Entities like cows and sheep and even zombies and skeletons wouldn't be allowed to. That kind of cool thing. So lots of options for the shield projector block. And that, guys, feels like a pretty good wrapping up point for part 1 of this mod spotlight. Now, I've shown you about 50% of the mod's contents if you don't count the dimension building mechanic, which has its whole separate book. So this mod, like I mentioned earlier, has a Mistcraft style dimension builder where you can build your own custom dimensions and travel there. They're going to need to be powered with RF. And if they run out of RF power while you're in them, well, bad things are going to happen. I'm just warning you. But we'll take a look at that probably in part 3. So my plan for the spotlight, part 1, you guys just saw. Part 2, the second half of the mods. There's still a power generation system, modular screens, which are really cool, environmental control system, spawners, builders. I haven't shown you yet the item filter or the logic gates. I was kind of saving those guys for part 2 as well. So there's a good number of things to check out in part 2. And then I'm thinking part 3 will be completely dedicated to the dimension building mechanic, because that is, like you might imagine, pretty complex and is deserving of its own spotlight. So, for now, Direwolf20 signing off. Hope you guys enjoyed the RFTools mod spotlight. As always, please leave some descriptive comments in the comments section and let me know what you guys thought of the video, and we'll be back next time. Alright guys, take it easy.